Welcome. I believe the topic was chasing the genre-defining hit.
That's right.
So you guys are still on the way.
Oh, still on the way, for sure.
Okay, well, I'm really curious to hear what you got. Take it away.
All right. So like it was said, this is the Space Ape funnel, chasing a genre-defining hit. I am Nick Mansdorf. I'm one of the product owners at Space Ape. I've been there about 4 years. I've been in the game industry about 8 years. And I'm in a good space to give this talk basically because I was one of the first ones to go through the Space Ape funnel to learn how we did things to help define the process and then share it here with you guys. So Space Ape, a little bit about us. We're a London-based game studio. We're founded in 2012, 118 people now, 30-plus nationalities, and over 70 million in revenue. So we are solidly mid-tier, no longer a startup necessarily, but we definitely have not made it yet. And this process we go through is sort of on our way to try and figure out that process. So our mission, what are we trying to do? Like many of you, we are trying to create a top-grossing mobile game. That's what we want to do. We don't know how to do it yet because we have good grossing mobile games, but we've never hit this top grossing. But our process that I'm going to tell you about is sort of our best hope from doing that. So a little bit about the timeline of Space Ape. Sort of this is the pre-funnel era, if you will. We had 4 years of Space Ape where we were learning to survive, learning to make games. And the way it all started was a game called Call It Football. Call It Football was a betting American football-based game. It was real-time in 2012, and it was not a success. And we killed that game before it launched because it wasn't working, and we needed to pivot. We were running out of money, and we needed to figure out what sort of thing we wanted to make. So what happened after that was a whole series of sort of top-down decisions where the studio had to survive, and so we looked at the market, and we saw that Clash of Clans was huge, and that build and battle was a genre that was doing extremely well, and we thought we could, fast follow into that genre, make a game that was similar, introduce some new features that would push that game forward, and so we released Samurai Siege. And Samurai Siege was a successful game. It made sure the company didn't go under. It paid the bills. It let us grow as a company. But it wasn't bigger than Clash of Clans. It wasn't bigger than anything. It was just a game that let us survive. And what we learned was, all right, maybe Samurai Siege wasn't good enough. Maybe we need to make an even better build and battle game. Maybe we can do better than we did before and make a new game that has more features and more a robust monetization and send that out, and that'll be the success. And that was Rival Kingdoms. And it went out, it did well, it didn't do as well as we hoped, it wasn't a genre-defining hit, it was, again, build and battle. And then along came Hasbro, and they said, all right, we have the Transformers brand, like, why don't you guys marry this to Rival Kingdoms brand plus build and battle, it's great, we're gonna make it this time. And again, the game did well, we're living off the proceeds of these games, but they're not doing what we want them to do. They're not defining Space Ape as a company. They're not the Warcraft or the Clash of Clans, I guess, which allows us to become the company we want to be. So around this time, we're looking at a development process. We're saying, all right, maybe it's about new genres. Maybe because we're going into this crowded genre, it's not good enough. We need to come in and we need to try new things. And we were still top-down at this point. So the CEO, the COO, they had ideas of what could be good games. We did some market testing. We looked at opportunities in the market. And we came up with sort of 3 new game concepts that could be something that would go forward. About this time, Supercell gave a talk at GDC. It was called Quality Worth Killing For. And they said that, on the way to quality, there are all these ideas that get left behind. You have to prove out ideas, and if it's not good enough, you should kill it. And we thought about that, and we said, well, how can we bring this into Space Ape? How can we learn from what they've done and really do something new? And so what happened was the sort of post-funnel era. We released a new game in this period, Fastlane. It was still on the old model, but we also created a ton of new games. And the idea here was that if we're going to create a genre-defining hit, we really have to take a lot of new bets. We have to be risky. And one of the reasons that I'm giving this talk is, let's see if I can get this laser pointer. No. The Lucha Libre Tiger guy at the top, that was my game. That was the game that I worked on, that we tried to develop and release. And with the X through it, you can see that actually it's one of the ones we've killed. And there are a lot of kills along the way. Around 2017, mid-2017, we actually partnered with Supercell. And now, since then, we've been creating lots and lots of new games. We've been pushing new genres and new ways of thinking. We're trying to create that genre-defining hit by going really broad. And so what you end up with is really a tale of two companies. So 18 months ago, Space Ape was a company that had 3 live games. We had 3 games in development. But 70% of our developers were working on the live games. Only 30% were on the new game development. And over those 30%, those 3 in-game games, there were only 2 new genres. So we had 3 games, but 2 genres that were new. And yet today, we are a company that has 4 live games, so we've released 1. We have 6 games in development. 75% of all of our developers are working on development games, and those 6 games are across 6 different genres. And the way we did this is what I will talk about a bit, is the funnel. Sort of a method to our madness. What are we trying to do? How are we doing it? And how do we think it could help us succeed? So the key point here is that in the pre-funnel world, we were mainly top-down. We did market research, we thought about ideas, and then we tried to make those games. And since then, part of the funnel process is becoming the master of your own destiny. The small teams, they have to be empowered. They have to be able to search out those game ideas on their own. They have to make those decisions about what the game should be on their own. They should have a framework for how to develop the games, but within that framework, they should have all the freedom that they need. And so we come to the funnel itself. And what is the funnel? The funnel is just our development process. It's like many people's development process. It has various phases. You have prototyping, you have your proof of concept, you have your agile production, and eventually, hopefully, a launch. And each of these things sort of is normal. It's a linear process. You could go forward and back depending on where you are in development. But what happens, what makes it a funnel, is that this idea is that we need to have lots of games. We need to have lots and lots of ideas. All those ideas need to be put into this funnel. We need to work on each of those ideas as much as we can. So if we have 100 ideas for games, we need to work on at least 10 of them. And of those 10, we'll get 5 of them that will go down and go into production. And of those 5, maybe, just maybe, we'll get 1 game that'll be a great game, that'll be a genre-defining hit that will make Space Ape the company we want to be. And that's what the funnel is all about. It's about creating a process by which we can look at new game ideas, evaluate new game ideas, test new game ideas, make our games eventually, and then put them out. So how is it broken down? There are a couple of different things to the funnel. There is the top of the funnel, which is all about idea generation. So coming up with an idea and then deciding if this idea is good enough to actually put resources against and make a game based on that idea. And the way we do it is we have this sort of time for yourself, time within teams, a way of coming together and thinking about making new games. And that happens basically during extra hours, once one of your projects has shut down, or if you're working on a live game and you're moving off, you have some free time, or in a thing we call Ape Space. And Ape Space is this time that is a period once a month that you put down your tools, you stop working on the game you're working on, whether it's live or in development, and you come and you create new ideas, you think about new game genres, you think about new games, and everyone in the company is thinking about these new ideas, and therefore we can populate this top of funnel with lots of different ideas and lots of different ways of thinking about games, and hopefully some of those game ideas will then move forward. So the basics here are that in this process, you're basically pitching ideas, you're doing these little prototypes of game plan and fun little toys. There is no full-time team, there is no full-time process, but it's all about pitching your idea and getting people really to buy in, to think, yeah, you know, I would want to work on that, and I would want to sort of make it a game. And this is where ApeSpace really comes into its own. Because we think of ApeSpace as this time, one, to generate ideas, but more importantly, it's about creating the team itself. So you have this idea, but it doesn't just take an idea. It's about the idea and the team together. And Ape Space is a period where the team, a person will come up, they'll say, I have an idea. And it's about whether or not other people are attracted to that idea is whether they'll work together. And it has nothing to do with management. It has nothing to do with anything except the desire of the team members themselves to work on that idea and to ultimately work with each other. Now, Ape Space is something that we do like regularly, at least once a month. Sometimes it takes the form of a game jam. Sometimes it takes the form of something else. But what we've really learned is that constraints actually unlock the creativity. So it's not just enough to have people have time to do whatever they want. If you give them some constraints, some basic constraints, it can really unlock the potential of those ideas. It can make them have much better ideas, and it can focus everybody to a certain sort of area of expertise. So the image right here for Destination Earth, was out of Brand Month. And Brand Month was a month where we decided that there were no prototypes, there was no code. All you had to do was come up with the backstory, the characters, the images, the theme of what a game could be. And Destination Earth ended up being what my team was working on. And it was this idea that there were aliens, they were coming to Earth to fight over stuff. Humans were irrelevant. It was just a location and a setting for it. And that idea, even though there was no gameplay, there was no game, sort of became a seed that we then actually worked for. And the team came together and we said, OK, there's something interesting here. Maybe we'll take it forward. And that idea evolved, and eventually we sort of set Destination Earth away. But that process of Ape Space actually delivered us to something that turned into a game eventually. One of the other things that was even more successful was M-Sports Month. And so M-Sports Month came out of this idea that esports on mobile was like a really good deal, like esport, M-Sport, mobile. It sort of was an idea. But the idea behind the month was that it wasn't about one day or one game jam. It was, we were going to bring in lecturers. We were going to bring in guest speakers. We were going to do education. We were going to do 2 game jams in the month itself. And we were going to put all these things together in the service of trying to create a mobile esport game. And that was the constraint. And there was all this education and support around doing that. And so that's actually a calendar of sort of all the different events at any point that were in relation to M-Sports Month. And what came out of M-Sports Month is actually 2 games that are currently on their way to soft launch. One game is very esporty, and the other is not esporty at all. It has nothing to do with esports. But it came out of that month. The original concept was developed during that month, and it created this sort of wave of interest in the game itself, which actually then became the game it is today. So you have an idea. What do you do about it? This is sort of where we came to. This is where my game spent most of its time, and eventually when we decided to kill it, it was because we couldn't move past this to the next step. And what the mid-funnel is you're figuring out what the game is, what the core of the game is, what the core loop, what the gameplay, moment-to-moment gameplay is. You're figuring out what the meta is. What is this game going to be 30 days in, 60 days in, 90 days in, 365 days in? These things don't need to be solved 100%, but you have to have an idea that this game can be that day 365 gem. Otherwise, what's the point? Because we're making these games to be top grossing. We're trying to be this great mobile game. And without D365, we don't think that's possible. Again, here, you're thinking about visual direction. So we had our brand month. We actually started with visual direction, but we moved on from that. So we came up with other brand directions as we needed to fit the gameplay that came to evolve out of those initial concepts. And that establishing in the visual direction is important because, one, it gives you sort of an idea of what the game would look like and how you would do it and what your art pipeline could be. But also it gives you something that you can validate marketability. You can go out into the market. You can create a way for players to have an App Store page, for instance, that they can see and they can click on and they can look at. And that gives you a sense of how big is this market? Are people interested in this brand? Does the game speak to people? If you have these marketing assets, maybe you can go out and learn that. But when you're in the mid-funnel, there's no real hard data. There's only a little bit here and there. There's your gut. There's where you think the game will go. And so we needed tools. We needed ways of thinking about this game. Like, how do we evaluate whether this game could be top grossing or not? And that was all about like making those hard decisions. Do we move forward, or do we kill the game, go back to the funnel, pick a new idea, and start over? And so for my team, we developed these things called Takeshi's Doors. And if anyone's seen the show, it's basically a Japanese game show. You run, sometimes the door is a wall, sometimes the door is open, and you burst through it. And the idea is that you have to go through every single door to get to the end. And so we created these doors, and we created a way of thinking about the game. And we said, if this idea can get through each of these doors, maybe it has the legs. Maybe it's good enough to keep going. And for us, this is my team's doors, and every team could have different doors. We came up with this idea. We were making a strategy game. It was all about characters and making interesting decisions and learning how to do things properly. And we thought, all right, it has to be mobile first, right? Mobile first, we're making mobile games, has to have the interaction, has to have the UI, has to have the performance, and all the things that make it mobile first. Evergreen gameplay, like we want this D365. How do we do a little loop of gameplay that can be played over and over and over and over and still have that fun 365 days down the road? And then scalable, like can we make enough content for this? If we're making 3D models, like are they simple enough that we can make lots of them? Do we need lots of content? What are we going to do? How are we going to scale this game? For us, because it was strategy, we also thought, player-driven content. We wanted PvP. We wanted this to be not about just what we as the developers could give you, the player. It was about what the players could create for themselves. And that aspect was really important to our design. And then the last thing was this opportunity for mastery, because it was a strategy game. It was about, you start and you do one thing and you learn a little bit about your game. But then 30 days later, are you still learning? Are you doing better? Are you making little tweaks? Is this game fun to play? And you're making yourself better at it over time. And so these were the doors that we used. And lots of teams at Space Ape now use some aspect of doors, but the doors are completely dependent on the project that you have yourself. And it's just a tool for you to look through and sort of identify whether your idea has sort of the legs that you want to move forward. One of the other tools we used was this idea of complexity scoring. So we thought, all right, they're games, they're complex. How much complexities can players deal with? How do we evaluate complexity? And so we sort of broke it down into like visual complexity, like what's going on screen, how easy it is to understand the VFX or the gameplay or what's happening moment to moment. The cognitive complexity, so how deep is the strategy? Like, do you need to know what counters what? Do you need to have really in-depth strategy and strategic decision-making? Interaction complexity. When you're actually like using the device, like can you tap or swipe, or do you have Joy-Cons? Like what are you doing to actually control what's going on? And that's really important in sort of identifying whether your game has the complexity that you think is going to be good for the genre. So what we did is we looked at games. We looked at Clash Royale, and we said, all right, let's look at Clash Royale. Let's evaluate it on these criteria. Let's get a score, and let's see how that relates to what we think the game should be. So for Clash Royale, the visual complexity, in our opinion, was low. They had a fixed camera. They had 2 lanes. They had 3 towers on each side. They had very strong color matching for each team. So there was a lot of visual information, maybe, but it was very simply laid out. The cognitive complexity was quite high. Your 70 cards, their interactions between each cards, their flying units, their ground units, there's splash. There are all sorts of different interactions that you have to know, that you should know, the counters to every spell that you could possibly play. So actually, cognitive complexity is quite high in that game. And then interaction complexity, theoretically, it's quite low. You tap or you drag. Those are the only interactions. But where it gets a little bit more complicated is there's a timing element to it. Because it is real time, because there is a delay, you actually have to know your timings a little bit. So the complexity there is slightly higher than what we would say is low. And so what we get is this average overall complexity. This game is of a good level of complexity for a mid-core genre, which it is, for mid-core players. It's not too complex. It's not too simple. This game has enough going for it that it's really interesting. Then you look at something like Game of War, and there's all sorts of different things going on. The visual complexity is extremely high because you have this world map that has all sorts of stuff going on, and people going across the world and teleporting in, and all sorts of things going on. And complexity in the cognitive realm, like you have 100 people in your alliance, and you're coordinating second to second like attacks to make sure you're defending and attacking at the right time and teleporting in and teleporting out. There's all sorts of things happening. But the interaction's very, very low. You tap. Like that's it. There's nothing there besides that tap. And so they dial it back there. But overall, they're quite high in the complexity, but that's okay because they want to be a high complexity game. They are a hardcore game. They want people to really be involved in that. So that sort of complexity is really good for them. When it came to our game, we felt that our visual complexity was somewhere in the middle, that we had quite a lot of cognitive complexity because we were doing these combos, and you had to know which units were good against which, and element types, and all these other things. And the interaction complexity was also high. Sort of the overall goal here was that we wanted something that was like Clash Royale, that was a mid-core game, that was average, and yet what we ended up with was quite high. The complexity was too high for what we were looking for. So then we came to this idea that, all right, we're at a milestone. We need to make decisions. How do we actually evaluate whether we should move forward or not? Like, what can we use to think about whether this game is good enough to keep going? And what we came up with this thumb system. So at Space Ape, what we do is when we're hiring someone, we have the thumb system. If they're 2 thumbs, you're definitely going to hire this person. I think they're a great person. They should be on board. I will fight for this person. There's the 1 thumb. Like, I think this person should be hired. They're good. I'm not going to fight necessarily, like really hardcore for this person, but I definitely think we should hire them. 0 thumbs. I don't think we should hire this person, but I'm not going to fight you. If you're really gung-ho about this, I'm not going to fight you. And then -1, like, do not hire this person. I will go to the mat. We are not going to work with this person no matter what. And so what we did is we said, all right, well, what's important for deciding whether the game goes forward? Is it something like complexity, or is it something else? And what we came up with it was vision. So do we know what this game is going to be when it grows up? Do we know what kind of game we want to make and what it should be when it's done? And more importantly, is it the best idea that we have compared to all the other ideas in the funnel? And so 2 thumbs was like, like there's nothing better. We should definitely go forward. We're definitely doing this. 1 thumb is I think we should go forward, but there are other ideas out there. They could be better. They might not be, but they could be. 0 thumbs, I don't think we should move forward. -1 thumb, we should definitely kill this, and I'll fight you to make sure it's done. And every team member sort of thought about this. They came up with their scores at once. We all did it, and that's where you get the discussion. It's not about all having 2 thumbs, because no game should have all 2 thumbs unless it's like the best game you've ever made in your life. But the discussion points about why we thought they were in all of these different areas and the criteria allowed us to decide whether we should move forward or not. And in the end, we decided not to move forward with our game. But there are many games at Space Ape now that have taken that next step and that are moving forward. So where do we end up? It's sort of the future, what looks like at the bottom of the funnel. And that's where we have 3 games right now. We have 3 games that are going to go into soft launch this year. We think they could be the game that is that genre-defining hit, but until we have data, we won't know. But what we do know is that they've gotten to this point. We think they have enough going for them that we have confidence that they could be that game, that they're fun to play, that they've made through this progress, that we've iterated on them, and that they're the best games that we can make at this point. And so now we'll go into soft launch, we'll get real data, we'll start making real decisions based off that, and then who knows what will happen in the future. We might get that genre-defining hit, or we might kill them and go back into the funnel, pick up new ideas, and try again. So in the end of the day, we sort of have this idea at Space Ape, like, what do we need to make a game? And it comes down to, like, we need to know what the game is. Like, what are you actually making? What's the core loop? What's the meta? What's the visual direction? We have, who are we making this game for? Like, who is actually going to play this game? Are there enough of them to make it top grossing? Is this something that's going to resonate with a lot of people who are going to pay us a little bit, or is it going to resonate with few people, but they're going to pay us a ton? And then, with all that information, do we think that it's actually going to be that top grossing game? Do we have enough information to make that decision and feel good about it? And then at the last of it, we need this small, empowered team. We need to be able to make those decisions on their own. They need to be 4 or 5 people who are passionate about a project, who love the idea, and who want to see it go through to the end. And that's where we are now.